Welcome to Thrive While Loving an Addict. I'm KL Wells, your host, and I am very excited to have another podcaster on the show today, Krista Zaft. She is actually coming in to us from Canada, which is just awesome. I love having people from different countries. Sometimes there's a different lens at the table based on experiences from different places. And we share some commonality, which is I grew up with a mom addicted to prescription medications. She grew up with alcoholism as a kid growing up in an alcoholic household, married an alcoholic, has a son who's now in recovery. And so very similar in terms of our story. So if you would just kind of take us back into the chaos of growing up, but also then the journey through, because how I thought about it was I definitely want to change the narrative as I got older. And there was a lot of learning to getting that done.
Yeah. So going back to my childhood, I grew up, my dad was an alcoholic. He comes from a family where a lot of dysfunction and a lot of stuff happened and lots of brothers and sisters. So life was a little chaotic for him, but that translates into him having some pain. And I always say that drugs and alcohol are a solution to a problem. Right. And unfortunately, that was his route. And back then, there was no talking about it. We didn't talk about this kind of stuff. I just grew up understanding this is how it was.
Right.
You know? But I knew from a very young age that something wasn't right. I was the oldest child. So you take on, yeah. So, I mean, anyone listening that understands that dynamic, you know, I had a brother and sister who were younger than me. And so you take on this responsibility role. And I think I just grew up really fast. And although my mom was a stable force in our house, she did not drink or anything on occasion, but socially not as an addiction. And she really just kept us together. But that being said, you grow up fast. And I had to shelter my brother and sister a lot. I had to take care of stuff in the house. Cooking dinner by the time I was 11 or 12 to make sure things were done for mom. So I was always trying to minimize the chaos, really trying to keep it under wraps as much as possible. And I think I took on a lot of programming about perfectionism and control and just that need for safety. And so that things would go according to plan so I could minimize any sort of chaos and unknown that would happen in our house. And it's a lot of pressure for a kid to take on at a really young age, right? So that was kind of the dynamics in our house. I became a very, very angry teenager. I was really a people pleaser and a perfectionist and trying to keep it all together. And I think when my teenage years hit, I just started to get really angry. I was mad at the world. I was mad at my mom. I was mad at my dad. And during that time, I was a little more angry at my mom, I have to say. And although I loved her and I saw her struggles, I thought that she had the power to change everything.
Right.
And I didn't understand that she didn't and the struggles she was having on the inside for sure. And so I really became this extremely angry person, and I did everything in my power to rebel against whatever I could. And so in going into high school, I was still a good kid and a good student. I always had that undertone of perfectionist, like I must do okay in everything and make it look like everything's all together and everything's okay. And I carried that on in my life. There were traumas and stuff that happened. My dad could be a rager, the type of alcoholic. When I look back now in hindsight, I see this really gentle soul, but just plagued with his own demons that he just didn't know how to handle. And so I can see now the gentle person that he was and the animal lover and the extremely smart and inventive. He was an inventor and a creative. And so I know, after a lot of research, I know that really plays into how sensitive people are and how that can contribute to wanting to suppress all of that stuff that's coming up. But I didn't understand that about my dad. I was just really angry, at him. And that really carried on into my young adulthood. I left home as soon as I could. I just was solely focused on getting out of that house, and then all my problems would disappear. And lo and behold, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I had some really great people in my life, but I sabotaged a lot. I was really comfortable in chaos. And I didn't understand that. I thought I was comfortable I wanted calm and peace and the little white picket fence and all this stuff I'd been dreaming about having that I didn't have at home. And lo and behold, I was much more comfortable in chaos. And so that's what followed me. I just brought that kind of thing into my own life as a young adult. I just call them the reckless years. There was a lot of partying and experimenting with my own substances and stuff. And none of that turned into an addiction, but there was still a lot of reckless behavior, a lot of reckless relationships. Yeah, just putting myself in some dangerous situations and kind of craving that danger, that little bit of the recklessness and not really understanding it per se.
Right.
Because that was still going on in my home too. So even though I was away from home as a young person, it was still going on. And so I was just recreating that in my life. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of unknowns within my own self. And I wasn't questioning anything then. I was just coasting along thinking, this is how it's done. This must be what life is like. I get into a relationship or I partner with someone who's actually really good for me, and I proceed to sabotage it. Because not used to that calm and not just kind of coasting along in that normal kind of behavior and that type of relationship. And so, yeah, I did a lot of that. And unfortunately, we had a major tragedy in our family. My brother passed away when he was 19. So I was 21. And that sent our family into even more of a spiral than it was before. My dad fell into the bottle and he never, ever recovered.
Came out.
Yeah, he never came out. My parents separated and my dad ended up homeless and used a lot of here in Edmonton would have been the downtown core facilities and resources that he could. You know, he lived on the streets a lot and ended up just from place to place. And I lost contact with him. In fact, he lost contact with most of our family for years. And it wasn't until I had kids that I had a son that he come back into my life very, very briefly, because I think there was a lot of shame. He had a lot of shame and he was still heavily into addiction and living a completely different life. And at the time, I just couldn't understand, and it made me really angry. And so I kept that distance from my dad. And I ended up just in a relationship with a man who was also on his way to suffering with alcoholism. And I didn't see the signs. I just saw normal because that was my normal.
Yeah. Could you put an exclamation point on that? Because I think it's really important because, you're speaking about I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Check, check, check.
Yeah. Because you think this is just the way it is and it's what you're used to. And so if anything different than what you're used to, you're going to try to recreate what you are used to. And I remember a time, I think it was in my later 20s, and I thought, am I just going to keep creating chaos around myself? Is this just how this is going to roll? And I think by just asking the question, it was like, whoa, I've actually been doing this to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't recognize that part of it for the longest time. I really just recognized this as normal. And underneath, I was so afraid to let the world see me, the real me. And I didn't really know who that was, to be honest, because I had been performing and wearing a mask and becoming a chameleon for most of my life. I blended in really well. I had a ton of friends because I just made friends with everyone. I never wanted any enemies. I would create the chaos myself, but I needed to be surrounded by people who liked me and accepted me. And if that meant putting a mask on, that's exactly how it had to be. Yeah. And so that authenticity piece was really foreign to me. I thought I was, but I recognized little bits and pieces along the way. And it really wasn't until I had a set of twins and I was in my early 30s that things come crashing down on me. It was when my dad passed away, actually. My dad passed away
that happened about the same time?
about the same time. So
wow.
I started recognizing, when my dad passed away right after 9/11, literally days after 9/11. So it's very chaotic. It was a very chaotic time in the world. And then my dad passes away. And so I think there was a little element of fear around a lot of things. And for me, that was a trigger. When my dad passed away during that chaotic time in the world, it's like trigger, trigger, trigger. Everything started to go off inside my system. And I felt so much pain coming up, so many things coming up.
Yeah.
And it was like I was trying to stuff it back down. I just didn't want to deal with what was coming up. And so I got even angrier. And that started to bleed onto my kids, that anger piece. And, I think my girls were about 2.5. And so I've been in my early 30s. And I remember my daughter was very needy and I could see me in her. And we were like, I just had this feeling inside that she was there to test me somehow. And I remember one day I was feeling extremely agitated and anxious, and I don't know what was coming up, but she was hanging onto my leg and whining. And that sound in her voice made in my head, it was like fireworks going off. And I just couldn't, it was kind of chaotic. It's kind of like heavy metal music playing in my head, and I couldn't stop it. And I literally picked her up and like squeezed her little arms. And I just was like looking into her eyes and I was wanting to shake her. And I looked at her and I instantly saw myself. And I put her down and I went outside and I just literally crumbled and started to cry. That was like a turning point for me. It was like an awakening, my first kind of awakening. And I thought, you know what? I cannot continue on this way. Something is wrong with me. And I'm going to hurt one of my children, or like I'm going to turn them into these angry people. And I just don't want that. And so that was the first time I went to therapy. That was the very first time I realized I'm the problem. I'm the problem. After all those years of blaming my dad and blaming all the circumstances, that was the moment that I'm like, I'm the common denominator here. So something's got to change.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are people listening to this right now that can relate to that. I think when we grow up like this, we all hit these points, an awakening, a moment that there's clarity that rises out of the moment and it shifts us.
Yeah.
And then to have the courage to reach out for help. I think that one step right there is so mission critical, so to speak, in terms of beginning on the path of our own recovery.
Yeah.
We think about if the addict or the alcoholic will get fixed, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But there's this parallel recovery going on.
I didn't see that right away. Like I knew I needed help, but there was a lot of shame that come with me. And so really admitting that to other people, I kept my therapy under wraps. I started to operate differently with my kids and in my house for sure. I became less angry. And something that a therapist said to me, and I'll never forget, and it completely changed. And this is for anyone who is feeling that boiling point of anger or whatever, you're feeling like you're in a state where your emotions are heightened. She told me, because I said, I'm yelling at my kids a lot. And she said, well, because my son was 4 at the time, or 5. And she said, next time you want to yell, she said, I want you to get down on your knees and look him eye to eye and then yell at him. And I actually tried it. The first time I started to get heightened, I was aware. And so once you have awareness, you just can't turn back. And I got down, I looked at him in the eye. Honestly, it's probably the last time I really yelled at my kids that way from that perspective of me feeling it. But yeah, so that really shifted how I interacted with my kids and
Well, that's
raised them.
brilliant.
Yeah, it is
That's just
brilliant.
so brilliant.
I know.
And in the world that I've grown up in, that would be like a pattern interrupt,
Yeah.
is because it's easy for us to go off and yell. But if you
Mhm.
actually get down on the same level as your 4-year-old child and look them in the eye, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and she just explained, she's like, imagine this tall person standing over you, and this loud voice coming out. And I'm like, when you get down on their level, you're seeing them eye to eye as if you were standing in front of another adult.
Right.
And, it just, that perspective shift was huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really changed the trajectory of how I raised the kids, but I still kept a lot of that pain and anger inside.
Yeah.
I kept a lot of the shame and the guilt I had felt, not just
Mhm.
for maybe not being a great parent at the beginning, but for a lot of my childhood and a lot of the teenage years, for all of the
Mhm.
things I started to see, that the patterns that I had done.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of shame. So I kind of kept it under wraps still.
Well, I think shame is the common denominator for all of us, whether
Mhm.
we love someone who is dealing with addiction or if you're dealing with addiction yourself. I did an episode not too long ago with a shame expert, and it was super revealing and super helpful for me, even at this stage of the game, to like better understand some layering around this. So I want to pull shame and pull it over here for a second because I'm
Mhm.
super curious. Like nobody knew when you were growing up, like you kept it all to yourself.
Yeah, like no one outside of my family and
Mhm.
like relatives or whatever really
Mhm.
knew what was going on. You think you're the only one when you're a child, for sure. You think no
Right.
one else, especially when you start to go over to other people's homes, you
Mhm.
realize, oh, well, this isn't the way. And all of a sudden, now you really have to keep it behind closed doors. But
Right.
even as a young adult and into my marriage, I was on the outside, I was a very different person,
Sure.
very like I was the planner and the funny person and the like kind to everyone. Everyone came over to our house and it was all fun and games. And inside
Mhm.
it was just dying all the time. And so, yeah, it was a lot of masks for me. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I really probably I'd say 2010, 11, when I started to do a lot of healing. I started
Mm.
hanging out with some different people. I started learning about different modalities like Reiki and some of the mindfulness stuff and
Yeah.
really got me from my head into my body. And
Yeah.
so I started to make connections and started to realize I really needed some deep healing. But it was going to take like moving mountains for me because I was very, very closed up and guarded.
Yeah.
Um,
So what
and
was the catalyst that like jolted you into starting this work?
Oh, my son going through his addiction. That was the biggest catalyst for me and my biggest awakening. My husband and I got divorced and I was on my own for a lot and the kids chose to stay with their dad. And so that was difficult, but we still had a close relationship, but I didn't see my kids every day. And
Right.
so it's really tough to keep an eye on what's really going on when you're
Mhm.
not part of the daily stuff. And in that being said, there's a lot of parents who have kids at home that aren't seeing the
Are
signs.
yes,
It's,
exactly.
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he probably started his addiction around 18 and he really suffered hard in about 25 is when the first time he came to me. And for me, I thought it was alcohol for him. I didn't know about the drugs. And so it's so funny with alcohol, you put this spin on it like it's so socially acceptable.
Right.
So you make excuses for it in your
Mhm.
mind. And you
Yeah.
keep saying, oh, well, he'll figure it out. He's just young, he's partying. I did it too, right? And that was normal for me. So I was literally minimizing what was going on.
Right.
And I think a part of me didn't want to accept it either. But
Mhm.
the first time he came to me, he told me that he was on cocaine, and I was floored. But I was
Mhm.
in a place in my life where I could remain calm.
Mhm.
And so he chose not to do rehab. And And I didn't have the resources or the knowledge base to help him at that time. He only stayed sober for a few months or whatever. He did fine, but without really professional help, it can be extremely difficult. And so he kind of slipped back into it very quietly. He was like me, a chameleon. And so he had literally learned from the best. And so he could fly under the wire without anybody noticing it. He had ADHD, so he was already flying around, doing all the things, and he hid it very, very well. And when his addiction started to get really bad, I started to spiral too. Like I literally felt myself going backwards in so many aspects. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I became very codependent with him. I started to think I could fix it all for him.
So yeah, you started to spiral.
I did. I kind of regressed a little bit. And because I hadn't done a lot of recovery work myself, I had done a lot of modality healing and stuff. But I hadn't dived into the recovery community. And so I wasn't aware. And so I really let that blind me into a lot of the flags. And I became codependent. I was just trying to keep his head above water all the time. And I thought, looking back now, I could see how he needed me. And that fed a part of me and a part of my wounds that I didn't realize until it got really bad. And one day it just kind of blew up and I saw him. I hadn't seen him in a while. And it was 4 years later into his addiction. So it was 5 years when he came to me the first time and another 4 years and some the second time. And he was hiding. He had been suicidal for about a year. And I was dying inside, but I didn't know how to help him. And I wasn't seeing him all the time because he didn't live with me. And so I remember seeing him about a month before he got into recovery, and he was a shadow of his former self. He was wasting away to nothing. And he was so withdrawn. I knew that if I didn't step in and if I didn't wake up, I was going to lose him for sure.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the next road. And he admitted that after too. He's like, yeah, Mom, I was just about done.
Yeah.
And so one day I just had this awakening and I'm like, I got to help my kid. And so we did an intervention, actually. It was in 3 days we did. It was super fast. I didn't sleep. I called every recovery place I could get my hands on, did a ton of research, talked to a whole bunch of different people in recovery places and interventionists. And we decided to do it on our own. My brother-in-law had done an intervention before. He is 30 years clean and sober. And so we had done a lot of work in this arena. Yeah. And we knew we had to do it just right because my son probably would have disappeared and I might not have seen him again. And so, yeah, we chose to do that. And it's probably one of the toughest things I've ever been through. But one of the most rewarding. When I look back now, I wouldn't change a thing. I think the mother came out of me, the mama bear, and I just knew I had to and this doesn't happen for everyone. Not everyone has an opportunity just to sit in that space in an intervention and know that they could be saving their kid's life. And he could have ran out the door too. Yeah. And so it was a crapshoot. But so we did that. He got into recovery. The place was in another province, so we had to travel, fly him there. And it was about a month into his recovery that his dad and I went to see him. And I'll tell you, it was the most profound thing because it was literally like meeting my son for the first time, like meeting my adult child for the first time. I hadn't known him as an adult in that capacity. Right. The language he was using, the work, he dove into recovery head first. He was there. He was there for it. Yeah, it was amazing. But that sparked something in me. And I remember him saying, because I was a fixer, I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to take control and make sure everyone's safe. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, he's like, you got to stop. You got to stop trying to control and fix everything. And he set a boundary for me. And I was like, I just kind of stepped back and I was like, say what? And I knew right then in that moment, I had to step into my own recovery. And that's when I started turning the flashlight on myself. Instead of pointing it for him all the time, I started to really, I went and found an Al-Anon group. I dove into as much recovery research and stuff I could get my hands on for myself. So, so I could learn about his stuff too, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
And so you simultaneously parallel recoveries at the same time.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I have to tell you this, that for anyone listening, there's just so much power in recovery and making that first step. And I have to say my son's very lucky because he has two families that are 1,000% behind him, and not everybody has that opportunity.
Right.
But we all came together and we all presented a united front. And the day that we dropped my son, well, my ex-father-in-law took us to the airport and dropped us off so we could fly him to Vancouver to his facility. And the day that my son got sober, was the same day that his 81-year-old grandfather did too.
Oh.
And so, and his girlfriend too at the time. They all celebrate sobriety. And so it's
That's
so powerful. It's so powerful. Yeah. And so there's definitely hope out there. And one person making a choice has a ripple effect. Like it can reach far. So don't give up hope if you're a parent out there who is struggling, and it just that spark.
I think that's part of the challenge with a lot of parents in particular. There's so many challenges, but one is losing hope. And we can find ourselves going down the spiral of desperation and hopelessness, and shame ourselves. And I love the simultaneity of your recoveries at the same time. I started my recovery before Sam started his. It was 12 relapses before he finally got the hold that he has had the last 2.5 years, and you just hold the space and pray that the addiction won't win. And so you're both healing at the same time. And I love this. So what did you begin to realize for yourself in your own recovery? And what did you begin to just kind of like you're getting to know yourself for the first time, like your true self, and then putting the tools in place that allow you to continue to walk that path? So could you say a little bit about that?
I love this question. I love this question. It's great. I started in Al-Anon and I started doing a lot of research. I'm a research hound, and I think anyone who comes from a dysfunctional background, we intellectualize a lot of stuff. So, I can intellectualize till the cows come home. I love researching stuff. But the connection between my head and my heart was the biggest missing piece for me.
Right.
And I think a lot of personal responsibility. And so I wasn't willing to look at myself. I was always looking outwards in how can I fix that person, or this person's to blame, or this is happening to me. All of this is happening to me. And where was my personal responsibility in it? And that's the part I really didn't have a handle on until I ended up in Al-Anon. And I had just bucked Al-Anon and the whole 12-step thing before so many times. I thought I should be there. My mom tried to take me when I was a teenager, and I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm not sitting in a room with a bunch of old ladies telling my thoughts too, right? And I found the right group. So it's not for everyone, and that's understandable. But I just happened to find a group of people that I felt at home with.
Fantastic.
And it wasn't about the religious piece or anything like that. It was just about the group and the connection. And when I say I dive into things, I dove in head first too. And so there was I think I was only in Al-Anon for like a month and a half or something. And I went faithfully because they told me to. And I like to do things correctly. But there was a step group right away, a sign up for a step group. And I thought, you know what? I guess if I'm going to do it, I've seen my son do the 12 steps. And I mean, the kid wrote a book in his recovery place. And I thought there's power in that. There's got to be. And so I was curious, and I ended up signing up to a 12-step program or like a step group. So we go through the steps one by one, and we got to step 4 and I felt like a door hit me in the face. Step 4, for anyone who's curious, it's really about personal responsibility, and it's making an inventory of all of the character defects and good characteristics of yourself, so positive and negative. And I really had a tough time looking at myself. But that was the key for me was, okay, I saw all of a sudden all of my programming from my childhood came front and center. I saw the perfectionism and the need for control. And even though all these things were for safety and because I was in survival mode, I started to understand the role that they had played in my behavior. And that's what truly shifted me. And I ended up meeting an actual coach that did a lot of visualization and like dreaming and stuff. And I hadn't dreamt anything in my whole, like I hadn't been a vision person I thought dreams were for other people. And so I just thought that this was how my life was going to go. And as long as I kept it all feeling okay and looking okay to the outside world, that I would be okay. So dreams seemed a far off language to me. So I ended up doing the step group, which changed my life and opening up a lot. And then I met that coach who really worked on vision and creating a vision and repatterning and reprogramming, almost like a computer. You have to reboot your computer and rewire. All of the neuron pathways in my brain needed to be rewired. And I spent a year with her, and within 3 months, I had started the podcast because I wrote it down in a vision. I wrote it down in my vision, and I thought, you know what? I'm not alone. And there's so many other people that need to hear what I've been through. And I know there's so many stories of people who have been through what I've been through and much worse. And how can I bring that to light? And when I started searching in the podcast world, 'cause millions of podcasts, and even over a year ago, there's a lot, but I honestly wasn't finding a huge amount of podcasts that were based on what I was feeling. And I was like,
that's why I did my podcast.
I'm like, this is crazy. We need to talk about this. And as hard as it is to talk about this stuff sometimes, it is the most like enlightening and rewarding stuff. It's one of the biggest pieces of my life that's changed everything. And every time I have a guest on, I think I should be paying them because I've just had an hour therapy session. But not only have I healed in doing this, but I've had people reach out and say, thank you so much for what you're doing. And for me, that just even one person, that's where the heart is. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, what we both know is that we heal in community. And so isolation and shame are the two biggest killers of us who love people. And so I did the same thing you did. I looked around, and there are a lot of people that are in recovery that are willing to tell their story and do podcasts and so on and so forth. But I found 2 podcasts, I think, for loved ones at the time, because we've been doing this for 3.5 years now. And I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, the statistics are there's like, at least in the United States, there's 150 million of us that love someone who's dealing with addiction.
Yeah.
And we're isolated up. And we're not telling our stories because we're behind the wall of shame. And I'm like, okay, well, something's got to give here. Somebody's got to start talking. And so I have found more people in recovery to talk to than I have family members. So being able to talk to you it's been such a gift, because we all need to understand we are so not alone. There are millions and millions and millions of people that grew up as we did, kids, and then married, and then had children, creating that generational pattern. And so both of us are part of, breaking those generational patterns. And like you said earlier, rewiring our neural pathways, changing our brains, because trauma is kind of embedded in our brains.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I have parents reach out to me in private mostly. So in private messages, which is absolutely fantastic. And I encourage everyone to keep doing that. And I do find it's so difficult for parents to reach out in any public forum because they feel they have failed in some
Right.
way, failed their child. And as much as you feel that, because I get it, you get it. It's, that level of shame that keeps us silent. And so many parents don't know how to handle it or don't know what to do in the circumstance. And if I was going to say one thing to them, it's this: you need to talk to somebody. You
Yeah.
need to start bringing those voices in your head and all of that dialogue that ruminates and ruminates. You
Yeah.
need to get it out. And it doesn't have to be in a public forum like this, but talking to someone, there is power in sitting around in a group of people and listening. Even if you don't want to talk at first, there is power in that. And so, like here in Canada, I don't know about the US, but we have other groups like Parents Empowering Parents. It's like in Edmonton, we have like a PEP society type thing. And like, I know She Recovers has another forum for loved ones as well to meet. And Al-Anon and all those groups, there's just power in group meetings. There is. When you sit across from someone and you hear them tell your story in their own words and their own experiences, and you're like, oh, I'm not alone. Like someone else is going through the exact same thing I am. And now I have this opportunity to just release a little bit, to relax a little bit. It's a safe space where that you can share. Right. So really encourage. Keep reaching out in whatever way that works for you.
Yes. And learning from others is, I think, so important in our own recovery. I'm super curious. Your podcast is called Becoming Sound. And so can you help me understand from your perspective, what does sound mean to you? I talk about thriving. And so speak to me about sound.
Yeah, I was having a hard time coming up with a name, and I just kept this little voice inside just kept saying to me, so much of my life I felt so unsound and ungrounded, like just not in my body, like sound in my body and in my thinking and my thoughts and my emotions. And so this becoming sound to me was like, how do I become whole? How do I bring back all the parts of me so that I feel like I have my feet firmly planted on the ground and I can make sounder decisions and feel more sound within my body, my mind, my emotions, and really bring that back home. And I think just that feeling of being whole again and learning to be authentic to myself, that's really what the sound part means to me. And just creating that for other people so they don't feel alone.
Absolutely. I think those of us who love someone, we have to find our own way back to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because generally we've given all of our energy to, quote, fixing that person or saving that person or rescuing that person or whatever that is for us. And one thing we do know for sure is that when our kids hit adulthood, we are no longer in charge.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole different ball game, because I was also dealing with stuff with my son when he was younger. And then when he transitioned to being an adult, it was a very different game. And so finding our own sanity in the midst of this insane, chaotic, desperate, hopeless, heartbreaking journey, and allowing ourselves to feel ourselves as thriving, feel ourselves as grounded, be able to laugh even in the midst of all of this, be able to have joy even in the midst of all of this, actually reclaim ourselves in the midst of all of this. That's a bold statement for a lot of people to kind of go, what?
Yeah, like how are you laughing and smiling while there's such while your child is in the depths of despair? And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is possible. It is possible because I think as moms too, we just think we're always meant to be the protector of the children. And we don't realize that they're grown adults too. And they have to learn to become their own protectors as well. And we have to take that back for ourselves, like protecting your own peace and finding a little bit of joy in your day, even if it's just a cup of tea or taking a walk outside or something to regain a little piece of that sanity so that you can be calm inside. and remember who you are is so important for parents if you're in the middle of it, for sure.
Yes, for sure. What I know, at least on my side, relative to my journey, is that when I sort of take my own power back and my sanity back and my joy back and my life back, eventually when my son started the last 2.5 years in recovery, he was free to do his recovery without being concerned about me.
Yeah. That's
and
true.
yeah, and we don't think that they're concerned about us, but they hate where they are.
Yeah.
They don't like themselves because of who they've become in addiction form. And they're concerned about us at the same time. So the shame, the guilt, all the things are like they're underneath a mountain of it.
And if you think of that little saying that misery loves company, and if your loved one, doesn't have to be a child, but if your loved one's already in the depths of misery, joining them there in your own despair is not helping anyone. We're not helping them see a better way. And I've seen parents come alive and start to take care of themselves, and they've actually inspired their loved one do and want to be better. And you're right about that, is when someone is in active addiction, they already feel bad enough about themselves and they hate that they're pulling you down with them. So you joining them there in the despair part is not going to help them. It's just not. And so just, finding a little bit of light for yourself and being the best person you can be and really nurturing and taking care of yourself will inspire others, and not just the person who's in addiction, but also the rest of your family members. Because I really couldn't see how much this was affecting his sisters and his other family members, cousins, aunts and uncles. The ripple effect is crazy. And so if you're not taking care of yourself, especially as a parent, it's really hard to see the ripple effects of that on the other people in the family and how you could be inspiring them to take better care of themselves too, or get some help.
Yeah. I think in a weird way, this whole addiction thing has given me permission to do the self-care. And I'm steeped in it at this point, of course, because I love what I do. And I have a great marriage, and Sam's doing great. And I really have a great life. And so I wasn't willing to let his disease destroy that.
And I was doing that when we were in the depths of it. I was right there with him. I was just as ill as he was. I just wasn't doing the actual drug. And so when I think back to that time, my whole body was physically ill. Like, I was manifesting pain and illnesses already in my body. We literally were becoming just as sick as the other one. And which is so sad, because I couldn't see straight enough to outside of my own, what was going on in my own body and mind, to actually help him like he needed help. I couldn't be there for him like he truly needed, because I wasn't taking care of myself.
Right.
So.
Well, in a strange way, that was our addiction.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because anything that takes over your life, so you can't feel, you can't laugh and feel joy and do things that you love and so on and so forth, we're in our own addiction. And so that's why the parallel recovery is so important. Is they can get clean and sober and go on to live a really healthy life, but we're just going to be over here like watching it happen.
Yeah. And some parents, even if they're not doing their own recovery at the same time, or at least like looking into it and diving into it, you're still sitting by the phone. You still have that addiction. You're still waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's not what your recovering child needs. That's not what the recovering person in your life needs. They need you to start being like taking care of yourself and learning to be the best version of you, so you can have a fulfilling life and all the things that you deserve to, right? So
well, it's interesting that both of us have sons that have pretty much been 2.5 years into recovery and are doing really well, and we're both doing podcasts because the stories need to be told.
They do.
So we could probably talk for another hour. I am curious, because ACOA, for some people who are listening to this podcast who haven't heard that term before, can you give us a little bit of context for that? Because I want people to understand that the patterns that we develop when we grow up in dysfunctional families, what we've alluded to today and spoken about today is those patterns keep us safe and alive when we're kids.
Mm-hmm.
But when we become adults, they sabotage us.
Yeah. And that's exactly what ACOA is. Adult children of alcoholics, alcoholism or addiction, dysfunction. It doesn't have to be actual substance abuse. There are a lot of children who grow up in abusive homes, whatever kind of abuse that may be. Some are worse, just more extreme than others, but it could be mental illness too. You could grow up with a parent who has mental illness. And so there's verbal or there's just stuff you cannot deal with. A lot of children grow up really fast because they feel like they have to take care of their parents. There's narcissism, it's a whole spectrum. But when you grow up in those environments and you have to develop patterns and coping mechanisms just to survive, and even though it's not a war zone or threatening situation every day, those little repeated traumas over time add up to complex PTSD. Right. So unlike a soldier kind of like a soldier, but unlike someone who's in a car accident per se, that's in a single traumatic incident, which can lead to PTSD. For children who grow up in these environments, we are constantly being hit with small little, almost like micro traumas all the time. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's less often, but you grow up learning to navigate, like weave in and out of those things by developing things like perfectionism, like codependency, like fawning, or using all of your senses. You're either in flight, fight, or freeze mode all the time. You're living in survival mode. Your nervous system is very, very heightened. There's a lot of hypervigilance, all of that stuff. So you grow up with all that patterning, and all of that, like a computer system, is just programmed into your brain. And so when you become an adult, those patterns start to come out, except now they're maladaptive and they start interfering with your daily life. When you're a perfectionist, I'll just give you an example. And there's people out there who can relate to this for sure. When you're a perfectionist and you bring that into your home with your now family and kids, it's like you have to do everything for everyone because no one can do it the exact way that makes you feel safe and how you did it. So, I didn't realize this. And when my kids were younger and I was starting to learn about my patterns, I remember asking my kids to fold the laundry or asking one of my kids to fold the laundry. And then they finished and I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I just refolded it and they caught me doing that. And they're like, well, why do you ask us to do it if you're just going to do it anyways? And I realized in that moment, I was stealing things from them. I literally was stealing the opportunity to learn and the opportunity to grow as a child into an adult and learn all those skills because my perfectionism was so strong that I was turning around and doing it all anyways.
Yeah. And so what I want to give an exclamation point to is what I think what you said is brilliant is you tied it to safety. Like your emotional safety was tied to it being done exactly right. And so I want the audience to hear that is when we start to get squirrely inside, it's because we don't feel safe. And
that's right. Out come those patterns and those coping mechanisms. And that's not always the answer in the moment. Is we just don't have I don't want to say emotional intelligence. It's almost like emotional regulation. And so in order to regulate inside, we need to keep using these coping mechanisms. And until you are willing or something comes up where all of a sudden you're face to face with, this isn't right or something's wrong inside of me that I need to keep doing this. These patterns can take over your life and sabotage your relationships and get in the way of parenting and it becomes this cycle like we grow up in this, we carry on these patterns into our own relationships and with our children. And then all of a sudden we've got a child who's now in the throes of addiction. Right. And you think back, like, did some of that patterning have something to do with that? And of course, generational trauma, generational patterning that is leading other people to react to us, right?
Yeah.
I think that's without intervention in some way, you spiral down a path. And so their ACOAs actually have their own meetings. There's a 12-step program for ACOAs. It's a little bit different than the traditional Al-Anon or AA or whatever. Yeah, it really addresses a lot of that programming, which is kind of cool. So even if you want to just dive into some of the research on it, there's a lot of literature out there you can read. And I read the laundry list and I'm like, check, 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 check. And I'm like, oh, things are all starting to make sense now. But unless you're willing to really look at it, it's hard. You have to be open and willing. And sometimes it takes a really tough situation like having a child in addiction to open your eyes. But whatever that is for you, there's so much help out there.
Yeah.
If you want it.
Yes. And there's so much research now. I mean, fortunately, there's so much research and there's so many books. And so start somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
Start
Pick up
somewhere.
a book. Yeah. Listen to a podcast. Podcasts are great because you get to listen to all kinds of guests, and it could be, 30-minute, an hour out of your day while you're driving or something. And you're learning. And that's what I love about podcasts too, is they're mobile and you can learn as you go. Right.
So I listen to them all the time in my car.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to wrap this up.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. So for those who want to reach out to you because they have connected with you in one story or multiple stories that you have told today, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, they can reach out to me on my website, kristazaft.com, and they can listen to the podcast. It's called Becoming Sound on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me. And I'm actually creating a program for, I think, kind of women in transition that have some underlying programs and stuff that are keeping them stuck, whether it be in their life or business, or so just coming together in a community and actually working through that kind of stuff. So I'm creating that. So hopefully in the new year, I'll have a group coaching kind of program coming out.
Oh, that's great. Awesome.
Yeah. And just, reach out. You can just contact me through my website is the best. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the work that you're doing in the world and for so easily sharing, yourself and your story and the hope that there is recovery for us as well as our loved ones too. So please grab a hold of the hope today, grab a hold of Becoming Sound, and know that you can actually thrive in the midst of this disease. So I hope our audience took a whole bunch home with them today.
Yeah,
thank you for being with us. Okay.
And
all right.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate what you're doing too. It's amazing. And we need more of us in the world to keep creating and keep sharing these stories because it's so important to keep talking.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you.
All righty. Take care, everybody.